Welcome to LOA Today. Walt Thiessen and life coach Wendy Dillard here. Today is Tuesday, September the 4th, 2018, 4 p.m. Eastern Time, your second daily dose of happy for the day. We hope you had a wonderful Labor Day weekend. We're having a wonderful day here. I just discovered, much to our surprise and amazement, that we just shattered a one-day record for downloads of plays of podcast episodes. We've had 1,300 in the last 24 hours. Our previous record was 900, and that was for one day. And it was just only one time that didn't get replicated. 1,300 so far. I mean, we just shattered the record. Holy cow. Like, I was looking at the graph, Wendy, and the graph looked broken. That's the only way I can describe it. Because normally I see it's one of those bar graphs, it shows you for day by day. Here's what this one was. And all of them were really, really, really small. And then there was this one really big one over on the right. Wow. It looked crazy.
So I'm certainly taking nothing away from the celebration, because the celebration is awesome.
Absolutely.
And did you really not expect it to start moving in this direction?
I think there's always a piece of me that wonders. I mean, I really did believe it was going to, but that quickly and that dramatically, I can't say I really expected that dramatically. I love it. I'm going to get really into it to get it to do it more often, but I don't think I really expected it that fast, that dramatically, that big.
Well, I don't know if you've talked about this on other shows, but, you sent all the co-hosts an email the end of last week sharing one of the comments from one of our listeners who really felt like not only was our show really cool and she loved it and she listened to it all the time, but wanted us to get an Instagram account going because she felt that was a great way to get out the word. And she said she would do that. Well, and of course you responded and said, hey, go for it.
And she started today. She started today. I mean, that's an interesting point. I wonder how many of those came from Instagram. I'm not even sure how to track that, but I'll take a look.
But do you remember what I said? All the different co-hosts did different responses.
Oh, yeah.
And I was the last one to respond. And I said, this is causing me to think what all of us co-hosts are vibrating to.
Oh, that's true. Yeah, you did say that. Yeah.
Because whatever it is, we're vibrating to something really cool. And our listenership is growing, I believe, in part due to what all of us are vibrating to.
Oh, absolutely. I agree. I just love it. It reminds me of a line from the movie Julie and Julia, which was a story about Julia Child and about a modern day blogger who was blogging about doing all of Julia's recipes in a single year. And
yeah, I love that movie.
You saw that one. That was a good one. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Many times.
One of the lines in the movie is where Julia Child is... she has received a letter from a publisher saying they want to publish her book. And she says, they love it. They just love it.
I totally remember that. You did that in the perfect inflection of Julia Child in the movie. Yeah, that she was saying that to her husband. They love it. Like she was almost in tears.
That's right.
How exciting. They love it.
That was on par. That was on par with, what's her name? Sally Field saying, you like me. You really like me. Oh, God.
Well, that's pretty cool. And, I know on the shows that I've done with you, I've talked about how I no longer need evidence to know that the law of attraction is doing on my behalf exactly what makes me happy. And this is a piece of evidence. And yet, some of us still needed the evidence. But law of attraction is always responding to whatever we're putting out in our own vibration. And I'd say there's a lot of positive vibration for us to be getting this result, because it can't not happen that way.
That's true. And I have to admit, I'm probably one of those in the category of those who need the evidence. And you know what? There's a part of me that says, I always want the evidence. I think the evidence is fun. So maybe I'll get to the point where I don't need it anymore, but I'll still want it.
But it doesn't mean that you don't get to be excited when the evidence shows up.
Yeah, right.
My conversation about not needing the evidence is I don't need the evidence in advance to believe it's going to happen.
Mm-hmm, sure, which is fabulous. Yeah. That's the ultimate optimum position to be in, because that's perfect 100% confidence. That's great.
Yeah, because when you're feeling the joy of whatever it is that you desire before it shows up, you're getting to have the feeling of what it feels like.
Mm.
And you get to enjoy it now. You don't have to wait. You can have that joy now.
I'm still thinking back to, years ago when I didn't understand that I actually had control over my own emotional system, so to speak. And the first time I was actually able to get myself to feel what I would have felt when X showed up, it blew my mind. Like, wow, I really did it. I didn't know that was possible. Like, oh my God, this is huge. How did that happen?
Well, ever since I left my corporate gig and I'm now like living life free to follow my inner guidance, I've had a knowing that money was not going to be an issue. It's not like, oh my God, how am I going to make money? What will I do when I lose my, corporate job's income? Instead, I knew that now I was free to make unlimited income. So the other day I was having a call with one of my clients, and I sell packages because I don't believe that onesies, like doing a one-time coaching session, really gives the client what they really need.
Mm-hmm.
So I start with a minimum of 6, but they can buy different packages of different levels.
Mm-hmm.
And so this particular client, she had done a package of 6, and then she did another package of 6. And so now I was thinking, she'll probably want to do another package of 6 because I really sensed like we were on a good roll, and I really knew she wasn't going to want to stop working with me. And so at the end of our session, I got to that point and I said, no, today is the 6th session of our 6-session package. So, how do you want to proceed from here? Do you want to do another 6-session package? And she goes, remind me how much that costs. And so I told her, and then she said, well, what other packages do you have?
That's always a good question.
And I was thinking, okay, well, one that's saying yes, she's going to want to continue to work with me.
Right.
But I said, well, I really don't have anything smaller. You're already in the smallest package. She goes, I know. What other packages do you have? And I went, oh, well, I also have a 12-session package and I have a 24-session package. And so I told her how much each of those are. She goes, oh, I want the 24.
Ooh, yeah.
My tongue almost fell out of my mouth because, and I guess, when we started, it was prior to her getting a divorce. She really didn't have any financial income. So even working with me, she was having to, beg, borrow, and steal in order to get the money to do that. And then the second time when she re-upped with me and renewed her, coaching with me, we did a package or a payment plan because she couldn't afford it all at once. So we did it in 2 payments. And so, I knew whatever she needed to do, I was going to be willing to work with her this third time. What I failed to recognize is her divorce is now final. She now knows what her financial situation is going forward. She knows how much money she's getting from her ex-husband on a regular basis. And so it's like, oh, she actually has more stability now than she did when she started with me in terms of finances.
Yeah.
But the fact that she went for my big package was like, oh my God. I was on a cloud for hours after that.
Yeah.
Because it told me so many things. One, it told me she really gets great value out of working with me. So much so, this is the 3rd time she's signing up with me.
Right.
And this time she went for the biggest package she could get because she knows the value, but now she's in a better financial situation so that she can afford it. But it also reminded me that the universe let me know that when I leave my corporate job, money was not going to be an issue, that money would just continue to roll in. And this was on September 2nd. So I was looking at, okay, I did just fine with my income for August. So now it's like we're starting a new month. And I'm like, what a great way to start the new month. And it blew my mind.
Absolutely.
And it was just reminding me how the universe is providing for me, will continue to provide for me. It's not my job to figure it out. Just show up and let it roll in. And it's like, wow. That's very cool.
It is. Yeah, that's great. I mean, that's pretty much, yours was financial, which makes it even more powerful in a sense. But that kind of a big burst like that, that's the way I felt when I saw the numbers of downloads. It's like, whoa, oh my God, that's huge. It's a
It
great
is.
feeling.
And when on the Monday after I was no longer in my corporate thing, I had the intention of just get the ball rolling. I knew what plan A was. I knew what I was going to work on, and it didn't happen. But I had all these other things that felt like they were the right thing for me to be working on. So that Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, I had tons of activities. And by Thursday, energetically, I was wiped out.
Yeah.
And I've talked about it where it's like, okay, I was a little concerned because my energy was lagging, but I've gotten such clarity that who I have been for 11 years at my corporate job is a person who I put myself on high alert. And so my adrenaline has been running like fight or flight for 11 years, pretty much consistently.
Wow.
And it's like, oh, well, no wonder I'm fatigued a lot.
Yeah.
And so I'm getting this huge awareness that now it's time to let my body rejuvenate. And it's going to take however long it takes. I'm no longer freaked out over it. As a matter of fact, there's a real joy in it because Saturday, Sunday, Monday, I did have one client call on Sunday, but outside of that, I didn't do anything that was on the to-do list. And I ate, I slept, I went outside, I watched TV, I played solitaire. I did what appears as though, in my book, I'd call it I didn't do anything. But here's what I know really happened, is because I was feeling good about not doing anything, like nothing strategic, nothing on the to-do list, and just knowing it's time for my body to just recuperate and rejuvenate and refresh. I felt this sense of I can do whatever I want, even if it doesn't check anything off the list. And I'm really doing something quite vital. I'm rejuvenating my body. But here's the cool part. While I'm doing it, I'm feeling great about it. There's no guilt whatsoever in, quote, doing nothing. I mean, other people would call me a couch potato, but I wouldn't have even taken that as an offense. It's like, yeah, isn't that cool that I get to be a couch potato right now?
There you go.
But every program I decided to watch on TV, every YouTube video I watched, every email that I read that came into me, everything seemed to have some kind of information for me. And I realized after 3 days, I could not have gone to a seminar that would have given me all the different pieces and parts that I received over the weekend that have so inspired me and have actually helped to give direction and a little bit of framework for the things I'm going to be doing going forward, and even offerings that I now want to do. And remember, I said when I was going to do Project X, I was just going to trust that the universe would provide the what and the how. I would just show up each day. And,
you did. I remember that.
Well, it never comes the way you plan.
Nope.
Because here I think I'm just binge watching Fixer Upper, and instead I'm paying attention to the characters and the husband and wife and their relationship and their business model. And then I went online and I looked at a whole bunch of stuff of, it's hgtv.com/fixerupper. They advertise it every single show, but all of a sudden I felt like I wanted to go check it out. And while I'm watching the show live, I'm also watching it on or investigating online. And I spent hours online. And as I was learning about what they're doing and what their business model is and their strategy and how much money they're making. And I'm like, wow. And I'm not giving away the specifics, but I was taking in what they're doing and how that can inspire me to do something of a similar nature. I mean, they have built an empire. And I'm always talking about, I'm building an empire.
You have.
And so they not only have, the construction business, but of fixer-uppers, but he's a realtor, and they have a restaurant now, and they have a bakery, and they have a bed and breakfast, and they have a home goods, like home decor kind of shop, and they run a farm. They have over 70 animals on their farm.
Wow.
They have agriculture gardens on their farm that they use in their restaurant. And my sister and I are going to be traveling through that area in a couple weeks. And so I said, hey, why don't we stop at the restaurant? And she goes, oh, that's cool.
There you
Well,
go.
I go online. There's a minimum of 45 minutes to an hour and a half wait to be seated.
Wow, yeah.
That's how busy they are.
Yeah, really.
And the more I was digging into what they're about, the more I was getting, they do what they do because they love doing it. And I'm like, that's it. That's the secret. Do what you do because you love doing it. Because when you're loving it, the universe gives you more things to love.
Mm-hmm.
And they love to create. They love to create new businesses and develop new things. And the more they do it and the more they're loving it, the universe gives them more inspiration to expand and to do more. And I literally last night, I was just sitting with this concept for hours, knowing how this is how the universe is actually setting things up for me.
Mm.
My empire is in process. I don't have to feel like I'm behind because I'm getting a whole bunch of ideas. And it's like, don't worry, Wendy. It's not like you have to start all of that today. But I'm starting to get the framework. And then, remember I told you a couple of weeks ago, I just had this spontaneous thing where I just started connecting with people on LinkedIn.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
And I got 400, 500, 600 new connections.
Yeah, a huge number. Yeah.
Well, I've been talking to people.
Oh, good.
And today, before this podcast, I had a little over an hour call with somebody. And not only was it like we were instantaneous friends, we felt like we were so alike. I kept saying, your LinkedIn profile, I felt like you stole the words off my website. That's what I say. And she laughed and she goes, yeah. And when I read your website, I felt like, hey, she's stealing my words off my profile.
Oh, that's funny.
Which is a great way to start a conversation when you feel like you're so akin to one another. And I learned so much from her in just the different things she shared. And then I, shared a bunch of stuff with her. And we just had this great conversation. And I've had the sense for the last week that LinkedIn is a really important source for me. Mm. And but to not go about it in the strategic ways that I've taken courses on, how to use LinkedIn for marketing, blah, blah, blah.
Oh, sure.
And I'm blow all that off.
Mm.
Just build connections and get on the phone and talk to people.
I like that. I like that. I got to tell you, Wendy, I like that a lot. I mean, a whole lot.
And when I talk to people, I'll get what I need, and so will they. And we'll just keep, and that's what I've had for the last week, which is so much of digital marketing is anonymous and impersonal.
Exactly.
And I've been trying to break away from the pack, but I'm like, yeah, but that works. And I don't know how to, I don't know any other way. And what I've been receiving, the guidance I'm getting is don't be like them.
Yeah.
Not that I can't ever use any of the digital marketing ideas.
No, of course.
But go be yourself.
Right.
And so for a while, I'm like, well, who am I? What is it that makes me tick? And it's like talking to people. That's what makes me tick.
Yeah.
Having conversations, getting to know people one person at a time.
I like it.
And then, of course, in the back of my head, I'm like, well, from a business perspective, how is that scalable?
Who cares?
And I'm like, I don't care. The universe will figure that out.
Exactly. You don't have to worry about that. That's the beauty of networking.
Yeah. So I have a call. I had a call today, and I have another one set up for tomorrow. And I'm not even going to put out I have to have so many a week. It's like, it'll be whatever it's going to be. Mm-hmm. And so I'm like, it feels so good to me, Walt, to know that my assignment, the way the universe is guiding me, is to just talk to people, get to know them, learn what I can from them, share with them what I have to offer, just build relationships.
Exactly.
And remember how I said when I left the corporate thing, the one thing that kind of felt weird is that I was losing my big network of people, and I really love to be connected to people.
I remember that, yeah.
And I still have them available. I can call them anytime I want.
Yeah.
But I feel like I'm in the process of expanding my network where there's so many more people to talk with and so many more people to learn from. And I'm like, wow, this is cool.
Well, it makes so much sense, especially when we talk about what your overall desired business model is. And by that I mean you want to be the coach to the high-end client, the client who is willing to pay good money in order to get a coach, in order to get the best coaching available, in order to get that quantum leap instruction and so forth. Well, that's not something that you scale by getting a huge number of people. That's something you scale by getting to the point where you find the one person or the few number of people who actually fit that bill. It makes total sense to do it the way you're doing it. So I love it.
And the other piece that's come to me over the last month is coaching coaches.
Ooh. Oh, where'd that come from?
I've had that for a couple of years.
Really?
But
wow.
I was having a call with, my coaching dearest friend, Rhonda, and we had done some coaching work together. Like every time we talk to say, hey, what's going on in your life? And we can't help but coach each other simultaneously because there's always something that comes up.
Right.
And I had taken her through a process, something she'd been working on for a really long time and couldn't seem to make headway. And I took her down a path that it was a tool she was unfamiliar with. But she got what she needed. She got her breakthrough. And then she kind of was asking, so exactly what did you do and how did you do it? So I kind of explained what the process was that I took her through. And she said to me, oh my gosh, Wendy, you could coach coaches.
Ah, there you go.
And I said, I appreciate that validation because it came from somebody who not only had I just coached her, but I taught her a coaching technique. Actually, it was a technique she said she sort of used, but I gave her more meat to it.
Good.
And I said, that's not a new idea. I have a little sticky I probably wrote 3 years ago that said coach to coaches, because that's what I got from my spirit being.
Very nice. Yeah.
And so, yeah, that's something I'm going to expand as well. I would never want to just not ever work with non-coaches because I learned so much by working with non-coaches, but I also want to work with coaches. I want to help coaches develop themselves as well as build their practice.
That's really cool. That's good stuff. Yeah.
All sorts of cool ideas floating around in my head.
That's nice.
Thank you, inner being. Thank you for the guidance. Thank you, universe. I knew it was coming. I knew it was the plan. But like I said, it never shows up the way you expect. And when it does, it's like, this is cool. This is what I knew would show up. I just didn't know it would. I didn't know it was going to show up while I was sitting on my butt watching Solitaire and watching Fixer Upper.
And I love the fact that your resistance level has been so low that, I mean, you've only been off the job, 3 weeks now, something like that? And boom, stuff's happening for you. I mean, it's happening in really, really good ways. So, I mean, that's ideal. That's great.
And, that was part of something I was thinking about yesterday is because I had no guilt with, quote, sitting around being a couch potato for 3 days. That is what allowed me to be in the receptive mode.
That's big.
Because guilt would have created resistance.
Yep.
But I had no guilt. So I was completely indulging. How's that for a fun word?
I was
indulging in couch potato behavior and loving it, knowing I'm doing exactly what I'm, quote, supposed to be doing. I could do something else if I chose to, but that's what I chose to do. And I was getting, go for it. If that's what you want, go for it. And I did.
It makes sense. I mean, like you said, you're in a kind of a decompression mode. You're basically removing the stresses of what you experienced when you were on your previous job, and you're letting them just kind of flow away. Well, what better way to do that than on the couch? I mean, really, we're better. I mean, you can put a bucket on the floor if you need to have it flow into something, but it's the best way to do it. Sure, just relax and just let all the stresses float away.
And then this morning I had this cool idea. I was thinking about how the universe always works with the path of least resistance. How can they provide something where we're not resisting what they want to provide.
Mm-hmm.
And so I thought, all right, so my body's getting refreshed while I'm in couch potato mode.
Right.
But my mind is open because I'm not resisting through guilt
Mm-hmm.
or any other feeling or emotion. And my mind is wide open and I'm in a receptive mode and they're just like slipping in these ideas. It's like I have all these different things on my DVD and I can watch, or DVR, and I can watch whatever I want. And I did a fixer-upper binge-a-thon for 2 days. And that's what felt like what I wanted to watch. And I had a whole bunch of Super Soul Sundays on there. And I'd start to, go, oh yeah, hit play. And I mean, within seconds, it was like, no, almost like prickly. No, not now.
Wow.
So, okay, stop that. Let's go. And I'm like, but I've been watching so much Fixer Upper. And it's like, go for more. Yeah, that feels good.
Okay.
So this morning, I'm laying in bed and I'm like, I think it's about time I should get up. But I didn't want to get out of bed. So I went, all right, if I don't want to get out of bed, what else? And I got turn on the TV. Okay. Look at my DVR. All of a sudden, now I want to watch Super Soul Sunday. Who would have thunk it?
Okay.
The first interview that I watched, I just sat there riveted going, oh my God. It was like a drink of water to a person who's been thirsty. And it's not like I felt thirsty, but everything this guy said, I was like, yes, okay, this is what I'm needing right now in this moment today. And then it was like, okay, go get up. And I did some stuff. And I know I was changing sheets while I was watching, Super Soul Sunday. And the rest of the interview, it was good, but it wasn't everything I needed. Or everything, not everything about it was like enlightening. But the first part, totally enlightening.
Sounds like it.
Set the tone for my day.
Yeah.
I'm like, wow. And yet I've put off changing the sheets all weekend. I was ready to do it on Saturday. I didn't do it Saturday, Sunday, Monday. And then I did it today. And I don't know. It's like even something as silly as when I change the sheets, I feel is all synchronistic in terms of me just following the yellow brick road.
Wow.
Following the intuitive impulse. Following.
Yeah.
And it's feeling easier than it's ever been before.
I mean, as you're saying that, I heard Dorothy and the Scarecrow saying, "Follow the yellow brick road."
That's right. Oh yeah, Wizard of Oz has been my metaphor for life. I mean, my inner being has used that metaphor over and over and over and over and over again in my life. All the different characters, all the different scenes. I think it's, when Fred Baum, who is the author of that, script, wrote that, I feel like he was plugged in, tapped in, turned on, tuned in.
Well, he was. And he wrote quite a series of books. It wasn't just the one book. I don't know what the total count is, but I think there's like 10, 20 different books in that series.
Wow.
Just amazing. Yeah. And he did it all in the 19th century. Unbelievable. In fact, the thing I remember is I remember actually reading some of them, not as a kid. I didn't know about the series as a kid. But as an adult, I remember going to the library and taking a bunch of them out and reading them. And there were some really interesting characters he created that never made it into the movie. One of the most interesting ones was a live clock, a living clock called Tick-Tock. And I thought, what a great name for a character, Tick-Tock. I mean, they should have put that into a movie somewhere. That was just brilliant. I don't know what made me think of that.
Show up in Beauty and the Beast?
I don't know. I can't say I remember seeing that.
There's a character in Beauty and the Beast that's a clock.
Ah, okay. All right. Yeah, I don't think I saw that one, but that's okay. No problem. But anyway, getting back to your story, though, I mean, you're doing exactly what it was that you said you wanted to do right back in late January, early February, whatever it was, when you started talking about Project X. And I'm just sitting here thinking, wow, she got exactly what she's asking for. And it's still unfolding. I mean, like you said, you never know exactly how it's going to unfold. And sometimes it unfolds in ways that makes you raise your eyebrows and say, oh, well, okay, whatever. but nevertheless, it's unfolding, and it's unfolding exactly the way you had in mind. Even with the variations, it's still exactly what you hoped for. Wow.
Yep. And there's so much more yet to come.
Mm.
And I feel like this weekend I was basking in the feeling of the bigness of what's to come that's in process of unfolding.
Mm-hmm.
And I felt like I was holding that vibration. Oh, that's another part of the path of least resistance. Because I was in couch potato mode, I wasn't getting easily distracted.
Mm-hmm.
And because I was binging on Fixer Upper, it was kind of the same theme. You know, they pick a house, they redo it, and, you know, the people move in and live happily ever after. There was very little distraction in my 3 days. And I feel like I was in this beautiful incubation period where I could maintain the vibration of holding space for the container of what's to come. And
That's cool.
Okay, that reminded me of something else. So
okay.
Friday, before my 3 days, Friday, my sister was at the house, and she was going to help me repot 3 of my live plants. And they're all really big, so they kind of required 2 people. And so we did the 2 smaller ones first. Then we were working on, called the Hawaiian Scheffalera. It is so big, it literally just touches the top of my 8-foot ceiling in my living room.
Wow.
It is a very big plant, and the amount of width it takes up, like I could stretch my arms out on both sides, and that's about how wide it takes up.
So when does it take over the room? That's what I'm wondering. I mean, is it going to get its own bedroom at some point?
Well, I mean, I did kind of feel like Little Shop of Horrors where the plant takes
yeah,
over.
Right.
And I've been looking at this plant for a long time, as in like I've had this plant for over 30 years, and it had been given to me by my mother, and she had it for a number of years. And so this is a very old plant, and I kept thinking it keeps growing and expanding, and I'm like, at what point does it stop? Because if the next frond that it shoots up, if it's already at the ceiling, I don't know what to do next. And I was thinking, I wished it didn't take over my whole living room anymore.
Mm.
And that was just one of those silent thoughts that I had never said anything out loud. In the meantime, my sister and I are now ready to work on this one, and I'd moved it into the foyer, so we had big space. And I said, it's not like we can pick it up out of its pot because we don't have the clearance. We don't have the ceiling clearance. So I said, we'll just have to scrape around it and dig out all the old dirt as much as we can. Because the whole idea of the repotting was that I knew that the soil was deplete of minerals. So I wanted to put new soil in there.
Sure, yeah.
And so anyway, at a certain point, she goes, what are you doing? And I was just kind of like jiggling it like we had dug out so much of the dirt. I wanted to kind of lift it up. And when I did, I was not thinking, because I had 2 giant poles in there that it's kind of like this plant is connected to these poles. So it would grow up straight, because otherwise it'll lean over and it would break.
Oh, I see. Okay.
And all of a sudden, one of them gave way from its pole and started to lean over, and my sister grabbed it so it didn't snap in 2. And I'm like, oops. And so now here she and I are holding this plant from falling over and not quite sure what to do. So while she's holding one end and I'm holding another end, we're in conversation. And I said, I don't know. This plant is so big. I don't even know how between the 2 of us we can even get the poles back in place to hold it in place, because the poles were keeping its stability is by being in the dirt. Well, now we've removed all the dirt.
Mm-hmm.
And she and I just sat there and looked at each other. And I said, well, you have a Scheffalera in your bathroom, don't you? And she goes, oh, yeah. And when it gets too big, I just clip it. And I said, well, tell me more about that. So long conversation goes on. And I said, I think I'm ready to clip it. I think I'm ready to pull it down so that it'll have room to continue to grow.
Okay.
And so it basically has 3 stalks. And I took the stalk that was the tallest and clipped that one, which actually had no growth from the ground up to about 6 feet, or no, up to about 5 feet. So all the growth was at like 5, 6, 7, 8 feet. Does that make sense?
Yeah, okay.
Okay, so like only the top of this stalk had any fronds coming out of it.
Right,
And
yeah.
the bottom of it was just this giant, like, trunk-like thing.
Right.
So that's the one I decided to cut off. And then she helped me figure out how to, like, take the top part that did have the fronds and put it in water so that hopefully it can root, and then I can have a second plant. But before we did this, she said, "Are you sure you wanted to do this? Because once we do it, we can't undo it."
Mm-hmm.
And I said, "Yeah, it feels right. It feels really right. Like I'm kind of excited to do it." And she went, "Okay." So, we got some giant clippers and we did that. And when she went to go get something in another room, I just started to cry because I was feeling into this plant. And I was feeling, because she said to me before she walked out of the room, she goes, "So I wonder how this relates to you and what you're vibrating to." How's that? I've taught my sister well.
You certainly have. I'm waiting for what the answer is. Yeah.
And I said, "I'm ready to do it because I've outgrown my container.
Oh, nice.
And I'm ready to expand and duplicate my efforts to the point that I'll become 2 plants instead of 1. I'll have more growth, more room, and it feels right." And then she walked out and I just kind of did a little bit of crying, but it was happy tears, like, I've outgrown my container. And that just blew my mind. It's like, I've outgrown my container. Well, I have wanted to repop this plant for over a year. But now was the timing, because it represented how I had outgrown the container of all the spaces I had been in. I had outgrown my corporate job. It was time for me to expand. I'd outgrown my container. And I just love how the universe provides such beautiful metaphors for whatever we're going through in life. Because now I look at that plant and there's only 2 stalks left on the main plant. The other one is sitting in water. But I look at it and it's only about 5 feet tall. But one of the shoots kind of goes up, it maybe goes up to about 6 feet. So the majority of the plant is about 4.5 feet now, but there's 2 fronds that like shoot up, above the rest, although as though they're like antennas for the whole plant, navigating where the plant is going to reach next.
Wow. That's fun.
And it no longer takes over my living room. It now is much smaller, but it now has the room to grow.
Yeah. Because you got to have room to grow. Otherwise, you stifle. You don't. That's what being stuck is. It's like having no room to grow.
Yeah. And so I know that plant was representing me in this way, which is it was time. I had outgrown my container, and it was time for me to do something where I could stretch out and expand in all directions.
I can't wait to see what the size of the new container is. I mean, it's going to be pretty big, right?
Well, I mean, not the physical container is the same, but the space it now has to grow, because 1/3 of it has been cut off.
Oh, I understand. No, I mean, I don't mean the plant container. I mean yours.
Oh, okay. We've left the metaphor.
We left the metaphor. We went back to Wendy. I mean, how big of a container is it going to be? It could be pretty big, really.
It can be pretty big. For as much as I was basking in the inspiration of my empire this weekend, it's going to be pretty darn big.
Now, do you have any other sense yet of what that empire is going to look like beyond what you've already told us?
Yes and no.
Okay.
I'd say yes. I've said a lot during the podcast, but so here's what just came to me. I happen to have deeper roots than what I've shared. like I'm rooted so deeply. I've been building my roots so much more than what I've shared.
Mm-hmm.
Like you only know the leafage or the foliage. I know what I'm feeling the root system right now.
All right.
Kind of cool.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. There's more of the metaphor, but it's big. It's big, and it's all going to be in the personal transformation space because that's what I've always been about.
Okay.
That's what it's always been.
Well, it's my job as questioner to try to see if I can poke into the holes a little bit there, but I couldn't get through, so that's all right. I'll just try again next time.
Well, and maybe the rest, or maybe what you're looking for is not yet revealed.
Well, exactly. Yeah. I mean, I'm sure that if there was something you could actually reveal there that was, useful to the podcast, you'd reveal it. It's just not.
I would.
It's like, asking the cook, well, is it done yet? And she's still stirring the pot. Like, give it a moment, okay?
Right. I'm in there stirring the pot.
That's right.
Yep. Very fun.
And you're very good at stirring the pot, I must say.
Thank you. The thing that's coming to mind right now that feels the most amazing to me is the lack of fear.
That is nice.
When I was an entrepreneur as a costume designer, a couple decades ago, I remember how every day, if I didn't have work on the books, I was in fear because I didn't know where the money was going to come from. And as soon as I'd get a new job, then the fear would go away because now I put all my energy into doing the job.
Mm-hmm, sure.
But as soon as the job was coming to an end, if I didn't have something else to go to immediately after, I remember the feeling of fear would creep back in, and I'd start going into fear, worry, doubt, concern, the whole thing. And that's what is so very different right now, because I've done the entrepreneur thing. So I know that piece of it, but it feels so completely different because right now every day feels like I'm on vacation.
That's like the best possible feeling to have, too. I mean, especially for an entrepreneur, because you need to have that level of high confidence just to keep taking the steps every day. Early stages, especially, because it hasn't all manifested yet. I mean, it hasn't turned into the full-blown thing yet. So you need that confidence, and you've got it. And like, wow, you go.
Well, when I was in corporate and I would take a week off, there was kind of like different phases I would go through. The first 3 days was trying to unplug from the job. Then usually by day 4, I would start to go, I'm not committed that I have to get behind my desk and work. That's a cool feeling.
Yep.
And then it usually was about day 5 when my creativity would start to kick in. And then when I would take a week off, I would do it with the weekends as bookends. So I had 9 days. Okay. So if my creativity started to kick in on day 5 and day 6, what was interesting is by the time day 7, 8, and 9 would show, I would start to be preparing to go back to work. So the creativity phase didn't last very long. And I spent more time decompressing from the job and getting ready to go back to the job. And so there was very little, and this is, I don't know that the rest of the world works this way, but this has been my thing. This is how I have energetically worked through things.
Okay.
But when I would hit like day 5, 6, and 7, where there was this level of creativity, that's when I felt like, oh, this is so cool. I can relax. I don't have to feel guilty that I'm not at my job. I'm getting paid because it's paid vacation. And that to me was the sweet spot. That was like the ultimate of being on vacation. And that is the feeling, like my day 5, 6, 7 of being on paid time off in the corporate world is what I feel like I've been experiencing every single day since I've left.
Which is very cool.
It's very cool.
So let me ask you, how I want to try to tie this into something that listeners can directly associate with in their own lives. So, I mean, there aren't a whole lot of people right now who have quit their day job to build an empire. That's not a typical kind of everyday situation. But there's got to be some takeaways from this that people can use. And to me, the obvious first takeaway is, boy, won't it be great to have this level of confidence that Wendy has with my next X, whatever my project X is, that I'm doing. So how do you build that level of confidence? How'd you do it? What was the secret?
One, I made a decision. I made a decision back in January. I was going to deliberately create something. And then I followed my guidance. And sometimes I ran into resistance. And when I did, I didn't shirk the resistance. I didn't deny it or shove it down. I looked at it. I asked it questions until that resistance melted and it was no longer resistance. I found new thoughts to replace the old resistant ones. And then I kept going and kept going and kept going. But it all started with a decision that I was going to live a life differently than how I lived it before. And I was going to be a deliberate creator of something that I could know that I created. It wasn't just I'll hope for it and see what happens. This is one that I remember back in January saying, I'm going to stay on top of this until it manifests. And so to me, the biggest takeaway is, and the reason I indulge you, Walt, and our listeners in all the details of what I'm experiencing is to say, this is what's possible. This is doable. And you can have your own Project X. And while you don't have to have a new Project X, you could take something existing in your life and enhance it and make that your Project X.
That's what you did. I mean, your Project X had been around for a while. You just gave it a new label.
Yeah. But the whole thing, I would say, how it started was with a decision, and the tool that I used is called personal guidance. That was really the only tool that I used all the way through. I kept following my personal guidance, and it never led me astray. And it kept moving me forward.
And what caught my attention as you were doing it was, at least based on what you told me, what you told us during the podcasts all these months, it seemed to me like your communication with what came from inside kept improving. Am I wrong about that?
No, I'd say you were accurate. And the reason I think my communication with my inner being and my inner guidance got much stronger is because I made a decision to do something and not let go of it. Because I've had the desire to have this empire for 3 decades. Well, why didn't it happen before? Well, because every time I'd get excited about it and I'd hit a speed bump along the way, I couldn't figure out how to get around the speed bump, and I didn't have the tools of how to move resistance out of the way back then.
Yep.
I'd run into resistance, and I just kept beating my head against the wall until it just got tiresome, and I'd give up. And then a couple years would go by, and I'm like, damn it, I really want this personal, transformation thing in my life to become my business. So I'd try it again. And sure enough, another roadblock would hit. And I couldn't figure out how to get over it. And finally, just the pressure of trying to make something happen, the willpower, my willpower gave out. Because you can only use willpower for so long.
Yeah.
And I'd give up. And so I knew that when I when I started this back in January, I felt that I had all the tools necessary that whenever I ran into resistance, I could get to the other side, and resistance was no longer going to stop me. And did I have that level of confidence when I started? No. I mean, I knew I had the tools, but I was scared that I would give up because that had been my pattern. But I'll tell you what, the coolest thing was that I talked about it on this podcast on a regular basis.
You did.
And even though I don't know the individual people that listen to our show, I felt an obligation to keep going, because if I didn't, then who I am and what I stand for would be meaningless. That's how I looked at it.
I also remember, too, early on when we were talking about this not just on the podcast, but like early on, you kind of clued me in where you were going with it. And during those conversations, you kept emphasizing over and over again, I feel like I've gotten to a point in my life where it's about time I started practicing what I preach. It's about time I just
Yep.
started really doing it. You know, I've been saying this for
Yep.
a long time. Saying is one thing, doing is another. And the doing has to be an inspired kind of doing, but by God, I know what it is I have to do. Let's just do it. And you did.
Yeah. Yeah. That's, you're right. That is the conversation that we had over and over. Um, and if I were to quit this podcast tomorrow, I will always be grateful that it was the impetus for me to become the deliberate creator that I know I was, but I hadn't experienced yet on a big scale. Because
Fantastic.
having this platform to be a place that I talk about this has just been monumental for me.
Well, hey, if it played any role at all in helping you to get your wits about you so you could go about doing it, then I'm so glad it did. Because it's just been fun watching. It's been fun seeing how you just kind of, I almost said that you dove into it, but you didn't dive into it. You swam into it. I mean, do you know what I mean? It's not like you were diving into a pool of water. It's like, okay, here's the river, let's go.
Well,
there was no dive.
I have followed gurus all my life. And so I've listened to, how they did stuff, and I watched them and I saw their end result. But the thing that was missing for me is they put it in a conversation that took them 15 to 20 minutes to explain start to finish.
Mm-hmm.
There was so much that I knew had to have been taking place on a daily basis that really was where the rubber meets the road. It was those micro decisions that were being made along the way that got them from A to B.
And it's understandable.
And
I mean, they were in a context of like a workshop or a seminar or whatever, where all they had was 20 minutes to tell you about it. So that's what they did.
Exactly.
You know, they told you what they could.
And I felt like what was missing that I could have really benefited from is, well, what do you do when all of a sudden you're scared out of your mind, or you're about to make this decision to give up your income and have to fly on your own?
Right.
How did you get through that hurdle? And so I feel like that's the journey that I have been sharing with you and our listeners on a regular basis, because I want to, I want to give the gift of here's what it looked like for me. Now, granted, it'll probably look different from every single person, but at least you have something to model. And I'm hoping that I can be a catalyst for people to go through the positive changes they want in a way that they can do it faster than me. Because remember, it took me 3 decades to get to the point I could finally say, ready, set, go.
Right.
And really see it actually show up.
In fact, it reminds me of something that you talked about a few shows ago. I don't remember exactly how long ago. You talked about how one aspect of the coaching that you would really love to do is to do something where you're following your client through their life. And as they're coming up on stuff, you're helping them deal with this and deal with that, negotiate this turn and deal with that block and all this kind of thing. And I thought, yeah, that would be ideal. That would be like the best way to move, because now that's what I'm looking for, whatever I'm talking about, wanting to be more in communication with my inner being like you are, and getting there very, very slowly, but kind of getting there. But the goal is now I got something that I can kind of talk with my inner being. And in that conversation, I can get that guidance. Okay, I've come up to this barrier. What the hell do I do?
Well, and what's interesting is I remember saying, okay, so once I'm no longer working in corporate, I'll just start each morning by saying, okay, what do we do today? Well, you know what? It hasn't looked like that.
Mm.
That's how I thought it would look.
Mm-hmm.
But it's more like each day I wake up and I just have a nudge. I have a feeling, like either go to your computer or start checking emails on my phone, or go down and empty the dishwasher, or take out the trash, or do some laundry. And it's, like doing laundry doesn't sound like it has anything to do with, creating income or creating an empire. But doing something as mundane as emptying the dishwasher or doing my laundry, because it doesn't require much effort, it keeps me in a receptive mode. My brain never stops. And so I'm always thinking about something, but I'm also receiving a lot of something.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I
while
understand.
I'm doing the dishes and while I'm doing the laundry.
I get the same thing. I mean, I don't really think about it in these terms, but as you're describing it, I'm realizing, yeah, that's exactly what I'm doing. I'll walk to the kitchen and there's some dishes to be done, and I know there's this other project I need to do, but I'm trying to figure out something around it, and something inside me says just do some dishes. So I do some dishes. And I can't say it always leads to, some new insight on how to do the project, but inevitably I end up going into the project feeling better, and that alone's got to help, right?
Yeah, and sometimes just doing laundry or the dishes kind of gives your mind a break.
Yep.
And let's say you don't receive any new inspiration. That's okay. But let's say you've now been, for the last 10 to 15 minutes, where you've been resistant free.
Exactly.
And that is a really positive thing. And I don't think we give much attention to how vital having resistant-free moments are in our life.
I agree. Yeah, I think we need to give more attention to it, and I think we need to give more credit to that, because that is how we get back into alignment. That is how we get into the place of feel good. That's how we get to the place where all the good stuff happens. And I know on many of those occasions where I went and just did the dishes instead of diving right into the project, if I had dived right into the project at that point, I probably would have done it out of alignment and screwed something up. Because I could tell how I was feeling,
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, like I had a vendor where the vendor was going to write something off for me because of an error that was on their part. And that was like back in May. And so I found the email the other day and I went, oh, well, I guess it's been taken care of. I haven't heard from anybody. It's been months. And so I moved it into a different folder in my email. And the very next day, I receive a bill from the lab and saying I'm 120 days past due. And I just laughed because I had literally looked at that the day before thinking it was all resolved. So I emailed, I was going to call the person, that was telling me they would get permission to have it written off. And I didn't feel right to do that. And so instead I ended up sending an email. Well, I said, please reply. And I hadn't heard anything. And every day I go to my desk and I kind of look at it and it's kind of like, no, not yet. No, not yet. Well, today I just kind of had a nudge, call the lab and just see what they know. Well, of course, the girl I'm talking to doesn't have the authority to write off the bill, but she was very helpful. And because my new thing is all about just build relationships with people, just talk to people, I was just talking to her. And so she's like, okay, well, I'm going to scan this thing and send it to this one and CC that one and tell them to talk to this one. And then when it's all done, I'll call you and let you know how it all worked out.
Wow.
And I'm like, okay. But that was effortless on my part.
Yeah.
And what I know made it effortless is because I was just following the guidance. For the last several days, it was don't do anything, don't do anything, don't do anything. Today was do something.
Wow.
And then the person I talked to was like somebody who was so easy to talk to, and she totally understood it, and she was going to take care of it from start to finish. I'm like, I love following guidance. It is my new coolest thing on the whole planet. Yes, I've been doing on and off for most of my life, but now I'm on, and really loving it.
Well, for those who want to learn more about how to find their own guidance and to follow it, you're the person to talk to. How do they reach out to you?
They can go to wendydillard.com.
There it is. By the way, after you go to wendydillard.com, go to our homepage too and subscribe if you haven't done that. And if you have subscribed, go to your social media site and post something about watchinglatoday.net. In the meantime, I'll say, Wendy, I can't wait to find out what the next update's going to be on Thursday.
You got it.
All right. And we hope that, one other thing to do, make sure that after you subscribe and that you posted something, check in and call us in on the next podcast. We'd love to talk to you. Just take a moment. Talk about anything. We love to hear from our listeners. And with that thought in mind, we'll say it to you. We hope that we talk to you next time here on LOA Today. Goodbye, everybody.
Bye-bye for now.